Com check. One. Good afternoon from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. You're looking at a live view of Launch Complex 39A, where SpaceX is set to launch its third mission in less than 36 hours. This mission is set for liftoff at 4:32 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 21:32 UTC, and is set to deploy 54 more Starlink internet satellites into orbit for SpaceX's privately owned broadband network. This mission will utilize a Falcon 9 booster launching for a record 15th time. This will set a new record for SpaceX's fleet of reusable boosters. They've had a few boosters fly for 14 times, including this one. This is the first one to go for a 15th flight. And the booster will target a landing about 9 minutes after launch on one of SpaceX's drone ships out in the Atlantic Ocean northeast of Cape Canaveral. SpaceX has two instantaneous launch times available today. One of those is at 4:32 p.m. Eastern Time. That's the one they're currently targeting. If something crops up or the weather becomes an issue, SpaceX has one additional opportunity at 4:52 p.m. Eastern Time, 20 minutes later. As I mentioned, this is the third SpaceX launch in less than 2 days. SpaceX launched two different Falcon 9 rockets yesterday from the company's two other active launch pads. Yesterday morning at 6:46 a.m. Eastern Time or 3:46 a.m. Pacific, a Falcon 9 blasted off from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California with the SWOT satellite, the Surface Water and Ocean Topography mission. That SWOT mission is a U.S.-French satellite that is going to survey Earth's surface water, the first global survey and inventory of all surface water on Earth, and will also be measuring the rising sea levels due to climate change. Another Falcon 9 rocket launched yesterday also from here at the Cape, from down at Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at 5:48 p.m. Eastern Time to deploy two broadband satellites into orbit for SES. These two satellites are the first of at least 11 planned medium Earth orbit broadband satellites for the O3b mPOWER network. And then another internet network, Starlink, is set to receive another batch of satellites today, with this Falcon 9 launch set to go from Pad 39A here at Kennedy Space Center. So I'm Stephen Clark with Spaceflight Now. I'll be providing commentary throughout the countdown and the flight of the Falcon 9 rocket from here on Florida's Space Coast. I'm about 3 miles from the pad, looking out at Pad 39A right now, where the Falcon 9 is awaiting launch. The weather conditions appear to be favorable at this time for liftoff. Though going into this countdown, the forecasters here predicted a 60% probability of favorable conditions for launch. Right now, there is a scattered deck of high-level clouds over the spaceport. Winds are calm, and temperatures are mild here on Florida's Space Coast this afternoon. Good visibility right now, so if this weather holds for the next hour and 10 minutes, we expect to see the Falcon 9 blast off at 4:32 p.m. Also, if you want to help us bring this launch to as many people as possible, you can help us do that by hitting the like button or the thumbs up icon here on our YouTube stream. That helps us gain a larger audience for our coverage. We've been streaming 3 Falcon 9 missions again over the last day and a half. We've been streaming these on our YouTube channel. A very busy time for us and for SpaceX. If you want to support our coverage, you can become a member of our Spaceflight Now YouTube channel. You can do that by hitting the join button, and depending on which membership level you select, you can gain access to bonus members-only video features. And again, you'll be helping us maintain and expand our coverage. We're hoping to grow our team over the next few months to continue providing our standard of coverage for the ever-growing pace of launch activity here on Florida's Space Coast. We'll be back with further updates in the countdown. The next major milestone will be at T-minus 35 minutes with the start of propellant loading. Now inside of 1 hour until the scheduled launch of SpaceX's 59th mission of the year. Two more Falcon 9 rockets are currently slated to launch later this year to close out 2022. Both of those are set for December the 28th. One from here in Florida, one from California. This will also mark the 192nd flight of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and the 201st launch overall of SpaceX's Falcon rocket family. Last night's mission for O3B for SES from down at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station was the 200th Falcon rocket family launch, dating back to 2006, a milestone for SpaceX. Another milestone mission on tap this afternoon. As I mentioned coming into the broadcast today, the Falcon 9 booster is going for a record 15th mission. This particular booster, Booster 1058, debuted back in 2020 on the first astronaut mission for SpaceX with NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken on the test flight of the Crew Dragon capsule to the International Space Station. This mission was scheduled to go yesterday, just 33 minutes after the opening of the launch window for the O3B mPOWER mission. SpaceX had planned to launch two Falcon 9 rockets from neighboring launch pads just 33 minutes apart yesterday, but SpaceX elected to delay this mission, the Starlink mission, until today to free up resources and to prioritize that O3B mission for SES, which was successful last night. Of course, SES is a paying customer of SpaceX. In fact, SES is one of SpaceX's oldest customers, and the first SpaceX customer to sign up for a Falcon 9 launch to geostationary transfer orbit back in 2013. That was a big mission for SpaceX to demonstrate Falcon 9 capabilities to deploy large communication satellites into higher orbits. SES also was the first customer to sign up for a launch on a reused booster. So there is some goodwill between SpaceX and SES because of those contracts back in 2013 for that first GTO mission and in 2017 for that first reuse mission. The launch today is for SpaceX's internal, privately developed, privately owned Starlink network, which is aimed at providing consumer-grade broadband internet connectivity to customers around the world. SpaceX has launched more than 3,500 Starlink satellites. They'll pass the 3,600 satellites launched mark with this particular mission. SpaceX's countdown is now approaching T-minus 35 minutes. At that point, propellants should start flowing into the Falcon 9 rocket here at Kennedy Space Center. But right now, we're not yet receiving any mission audio from SpaceX's launch team, as they typically provide to us. We'll stand by for that audio to confirm the start of prop load and to confirm the target launch time is still set for 4:32 p.m. Eastern or 21:32 UTC. We've now passed that T-minus 35-minute milestone. There's no sign yet of any propellant loading on the Falcon 9 rocket, so we're not sure if SpaceX is still targeting 4:32 p.m. We're waiting word from launch control on whether they might be targeting the backup opportunity today, which is at 4:52 p.m., in which case prop load is still about 15 minutes away. We haven't heard any update from SpaceX launch control yet, although there's no indication that propellant loading has begun. So that makes a launch at 4:32 p.m. Eastern Time seem unlikely at this point. We should be seeing frost building up on the first stage booster and some venting from the strongback if propellant loading was underway. We don't see any indication of that, as you can see the same in the view we're seeing of pad 39A right now. So that likely means, although we haven't confirmed, that the launch is going to be targeted for the second opportunity this afternoon at 4:52 p.m. Eastern Time, 21:52 UTC. We've put that, or we've taken the countdown clock down, so there's no confusion, because we don't think they're still targeting 4:32 p.m. We think they're likely targeting 4:52 p.m. Eastern Time for the Starlink launch today. While we await news from SpaceX on the status of today's launch opportunity, please hit the like button here on our stream. That helps us gain a larger audience for our coverage. We want to bring this to as many people as possible. And to help us do that, to reach a broader audience, you can click the thumbs up button or the like button here on our YouTube stream. Also, if you want to support our coverage, there's a couple of ways to do that. You can join our YouTube channel by hitting the join button. That helps us maintain and expand our coverage. Those proceeds from our membership program go directly into building and expanding our coverage for a very busy time here on Florida Space Coast. This is launch number 56 of the year here in Florida. You can also contribute and help us maintain our coverage by contributing in the super chat function here on YouTube in the chat. Also, if you have any questions about launches, about SpaceX, or about this particular Starlink mission, you can put those in the chat as well. I'll do my best to answer as many as possible. Weather conditions here in Florida do appear to be favorable for launch this afternoon. It is cloudy. There's some high cloud cover over the spaceport. Similar conditions to what we saw this time 24 hours ago for the Falcon 9 launch yesterday for the O3b mPOWER constellation. It was overcast, but visibility was good otherwise. We did see the rocket for about 45 seconds until it went to the cloud cover last night. We expect similar conditions this afternoon. Again, we think SpaceX is targeting 4:52 p.m. Eastern Time for the launch, though there's no word yet from SpaceX on a new target launch time. We do see no sign, we don't see any sign of propellant loading out at the pad right now. Well, now we are seeing the big vent, which we typically see at T-minus 25, or about T-minus 20 minutes. So SpaceX hasn't done a great job in keeping the public or the media informed on the status of today's launch attempt, I must say, with no audio coming in from launch control at this point. However, we see the big vent.
HTRP1 load has closed up.
And there's the first audio we hear from SpaceX launch control to confirm that the second stage is now fueled. So we've seen no indication from any visuals that we have of the pad of any frost or ice buildup on the first stage as we would normally see. And of course we had no audio from SpaceX launch control earlier in the countdown to confirm the start of propellant loading, but obviously propellant loading is underway. Again, SpaceX was not providing any updates on the status of today's launch attempt as they normally do earlier in the countdown. So we weren't able to pass along the information of the status of the countdown until now. But propellant loading is underway. Launch is on track for 4:32 p.m. Eastern Time.
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
Now T-minus 13 minutes until the launch of the Falcon 9 rocket. Here's a time-lapse replay of the Falcon 9 as it rolled out to the pad in preparation for today's launch. You can see the sunrise here in the time lapse showing the Falcon 9 out on pad 39A before it was lifted vertical. You can also see some of the construction work ongoing at the Starship launch facility that's under construction at pad 39A for SpaceX's next generation rocket program. And there's the Falcon 9 as it was raised vertical, lifted vertical using that hydraulic strongback transporter erector in preparation for today's countdown. This rollout and raising of the rocket vertical occurred on Thursday. "11 minutes, 30 seconds to go until launch. Now 9 minutes until liftoff. Here's a view of what these 54 Starlink Internet satellites look like in launch configuration. This is a file photo from SpaceX before a previous launch, but this is what these satellites look like as they're encapsulated inside the payload fairing. Again, this mission is carrying 54 Internet satellites. Each of these satellites weighs about a quarter ton. The spacecraft are powered by solar energy, and they have ion propulsion systems. They're built on a SpaceX assembly line in Redmond, Washington, near Seattle. And these satellites are heading into what's known as shell number 4. There are 5 different shells in the Starlink network at slightly different altitudes and different inclinations, ranging from mid-inclination to polar inclinations. Shell number 4, the target for today's flight, is at 335 miles or 540 kilometers at 53.2 degrees. This is what a Starlink user terminal looks like. Starlink consumers can purchase this terminal and pay a monthly subscription fee to gain access to the low-latency broadband service provided by SpaceX's Starlink network. Coming up at T-minus 7 minutes will be the next major milestone in the countdown. That will be the start of the thermal conditioning or chill down of the Merlin engines at the bottom of the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. This chill down involves flowing a little bit of super cold densified liquid oxygen through the propulsion system and plumbing of those engines to guard against the thermal shock from the more rapid flow of super cold cryogenic fluid at engine ignition. That chill down should now be underway. It began at T-minus 7 minutes if everything is on track. In the next minute or so, we expect to hear also confirmation that the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket has been fully fueled. We just heard the call for engine chill down.
Stage 1 RP1 load complete.
And there's the call that the Stage 1 RP1 load is complete. RP1 stands for Rocket Propellant 1. That's the highly refined rocket-grade kerosene that fuels the Merlin engines on the Falcon 9. Liquid oxygen will continue flowing into the vehicle until about T-minus 2 minutes. Again, if you're just joining us, please hit the like button on our YouTube stream to gain access to exclusive members-only video, depending on which membership level you select. You'll also be helping us maintain and expand our coverage of launches. T-minus 5 minutes, 15 seconds. After liftoff, the Falcon 9 rocket will be heading northeast from the Kennedy Space Center Launch Complex 39A area, flying a trajectory roughly parallel to the east coast of the United States. We've labeled here the location of the drone ship. Just read the instructions, which is positioned about 400 miles downrange from the Cape, roughly due east of Charleston, South Carolina.
Thanks for pressing for Starman retract.
T-minus 4 minutes and 30 seconds. This booster 1058, is going for a record 15th flight today. It debuted back on May the 30th of 2020 with the historic Demo 2 mission on SpaceX's Crew Dragon spacecraft, launching astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken on a flight to the International Space Station, ending 9 years of a gap in U.S.
Strong back lower has started.
human spaceflight launch capability. Flight number 15 for booster 1058 on track for 4 minutes from now. The strong back out at pad 39A is now being retracted into position for engine start. It's reclining to an angle of about 1.5 degrees from the Falcon 9.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
We've heard the call that Stage 1 liquid oxygen loading is complete. Stage 2 liquid oxygen loading should be completed momentarily. I'm going to hand off to Stephen Young, my colleague, who will be providing commentary for the final couple of minutes of today's countdown, as well as the initial climb into space for SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket with 54 Starlink internet satellites.
Now within 2 minutes of launch, the Falcon 9 should be approaching full capacity on its fuel and oxidizer tanks. There we see venting from the strong back, which indicates that the Falcon 9 is fully fueled. There was the call. Coming up on T-minus 1 minute, the Falcon 9's onboard computers will be taking control of the countdown. We've had confirmation that the Falcon 9's onboard computers are now running the remainder of the countdown. And the launch director has given his final go for launch. T-minus 20 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 with 54 Starlink satellites. The Falcon 9 is rolling onto the correct launch azimuth as it climbs away from pad 39A. Today, I'm not sure we're going to regain a visual of it. that SpaceX will, and there we go. SpaceX is providing us with onboard cameras. All is looking good. The Falcon 9 is passing through the period of maximum aerodynamic pressure. Falcon 9 continues to climb away.
Now T plus 2 minutes 40 seconds into the flight. We've seen confirmation of stage separation, so the upper stage of the Falcon 9 has taken over. The flight booster 1058 has finished its role in today's launch. Now 3 minutes 20 seconds into the flight, we've heard confirmation from SpaceX of payload fairing jettison. So those 54 Starlink internet satellites are now exposed to the space environment for the first time. Approaching 4 minutes into the flight, a good climb out for the Falcon 9 from Kennedy Space Center so far. A downrange tracking station in Bermuda is now receiving signals as the Falcon 9 flies to the northeast from Cape Canaveral from Kennedy Space Center over the Atlantic Ocean. The upper stage seen here on the right-hand side of your screen glowing red hot. That Merlin vacuum engine is generating 200,000 pounds of thrust. 5 minutes, 50 seconds into the flight. About a minute away now from the next major event on the first stage, which will be the entry burn, the restart of 3 of the 9 Merlin engines on the booster to help slow it down for re-entry back into the atmosphere. Altitude on the first stage now 100 kilometers and descending. The second stage now at 208 kilometers and climbing with those Starlink satellites on board.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
There's confirmation of entry burn shutdown, so booster 1015 has completed one of its first
trajectory nominal.
Post-launch pre-landing maneuvers to slow it down for re-entry. You can see it speeding back to Earth, 5,700 kilometers per hour now.
FTS has saved.
Second stage, about a minute remaining in its burn to place these 54 Starlink satellites into orbit. This map from SpaceX shows the location of the second stage, continuing to head down range off the Carolinas. The first stage booster heading for the drone ship, just read the instructions, due east of Charleston, South Carolina. 8 minutes since launch.
Stage 1 transonic.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
And the landing burn is underway. The center engine on booster 1058 has ignited to slow the rocket down for
Stage 1
landing on the drone ship. Coming in now 200 kilometers per hour and slowing. There's the drone ship
Stage
in
1
view.
landing leg deploy.
And landing. Looks like
Stage 1
booster
landing confirmed.
1058 has arrived on the deck of the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Floating in the Atlantic Ocean. Great view there of the booster on the deck and near bullseye. This is the 15th flight
Acquisition of signal, Newfoundland.
for this booster, which
Nominal deploy orbit.
debuted more than 2 years ago in May 2020 on the historic flight of Demo 2, the Crew Dragon's first astronaut mission. That has now logged 15 flights and has launched 777 spacecraft over those 15 flights, plus 2 astronauts.
Expected loss of signal, Cape.
And we've heard confirmation of a nominal deploy orbit achieved by the Falcon 9's upper stage. So this indicates that the rocket has placed the 54 satellites into the expected elliptical low-altitude transfer orbit, about 200 miles above the Earth at its highest point. So a very low orbit just over the atmosphere. About 5 minutes now remaining until the deployment of the 54 Starlink Internet satellites. SpaceX's live webcast is ending at this time, so we don't expect to see any live video from the rocket at payload separation. However, the tracking map from SpaceX continues to be up. We'll bring that to you for the next few minutes. And we should hear verbal confirmation of Starlink deployment from SpaceX Launch Control at T plus 15 minutes, 22 seconds. That's the expected time of payload separation.
Starlink deploy confirmed.
we heard confirmation a few moments ago of Starlink deployment. So those 54 Starlink satellites have separated from the Falcon 9 rocket. They'll use their onboard propulsion to climb from their current low altitude orbit, ranging between 200 and 330 kilometers above the Earth, up to an operational altitude of 540 kilometers, or about 335 miles, where they'll enter commercial service. With this Starlink 437 mission now in the books, a successful launch, here's a look ahead at the upcoming missions we'll be covering. Tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Rocket Lab is scheduled to fly their first mission from U.S. soil. That'll be the launch of an Electron rocket with 3 small satellites on board for a company called Hawkeye 360. Launch from Wallops Island, Virginia is scheduled for a 2-hour window tomorrow, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 2300 to 1 a.m. UTC tomorrow night into Monday morning. Again, that'll be the first Rocket Lab mission from Virginia following the launch of more than 30 flights from their spaceport down in New Zealand. Later in the week on Tuesday night, Arianespace will have their final launch of the year. A Vega C rocket will launch 2 very high-resolution imaging satellites, Earth observation satellites for Airbus. These satellites are called Pleiades Neo 5 and 6. Launch from the Guiana Space Center is set for 9:47 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, 1:47 a.m. UTC Wednesday. Then there's a bit of a break around the Christmas holiday period. And after Christmas, before New Year's, SpaceX has 2 more launches planned before the end of 2022. On December the 28th, another launch of Starlink satellites is on tap from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Pad 40. And the following day, actually the night of December the 28th Pacific Time, the morning of December the 29th Eastern Time and UTC, SpaceX's final launch of the year will be hauling the Eros C3 Earth observation satellite into polar orbit for the Israeli company ImageSat International. Again, that launch will be scheduled from Vandenberg Space Force Base late in the night, December the 28th, California time, early morning, December the 29th, Florida time, East Coast time. That'll be SpaceX's 61st and final planned launch of 2022. We'll leave you with one final look at Launch Complex 39A, where the Falcon 9 rocket with 54 Starlink satellites took off 27.5 minutes ago at 4:32 p.m. Eastern Time, 21:32 UTC. This was the 56th launch of the year from Florida Space Coast, the 59th of the year overall for SpaceX, including launches they've conducted from here in Florida and from California. So until next time, have a great rest of your weekend. I'm Stephen Clark reporting live from Kennedy Space Center. Have a good night.